Nightmares. Most of us have them. Most of us wake up from them. But imagine if you couldn't. Imagine if that nightmare was something you could never wake from. Imagine if you were a child in this nightmare. That's Little Nightmares. Developed by Tarsier Studios and published by Bandai Namco, Little Nightmares is a puzzle platformer with horror at its core. With the release of Little Nightmares 3, I figured I'd revisit this series and really get into its lore, its story, its atmosphere. This is going to be part 1 of a 2-part video. This one is going to cover the first game, and the second will cover the second game. Alright, that's it. Let's get on with what you actually came here for, and let's dive into Little Nightmares. With the start, our little raincoat-clad child wakes from a nightmare of a masked lady. The lady. We can see that she's found refuge in an old suitcase, a small comfort in this damp, metallic purgatory. To add to the unfortunate circumstances, this tiny lady must navigate the structure known as the Maw, with a Zippo lighter being her only possession. She doesn't even have shoes. As she departs her temporary shelter, we can see giant chains in a cavernous background, hinting at just how big this place is, and just how small this girl is. This girl that we're gonna call 6. But what exactly is the Maw? This is the Maw, a metallic submersible beast catering to insatiable hunger. The entities within this great metal sea beast keep it operating, from fueling the coal fire furnace to preparing the great feast for its newest influx of guests. One of these entities, these monsters, is the Wax Bellman, which we can see didn't quite make the cut. We don't see more than his legs, but with the chair and envelope in his vicinity, I think we can guess what happened here. None of this matters to 6. She is not surprised by the sight of the man. No, she is not fazed at all. Just what has she seen in her short life to seem so callous and indifferent? This question we will ponder as 6 moves forward, passing by a black ooze trail that leads to a refrigerator. We can see black handprints on the door, which makes it seem like the owner was holding tight while something was trying to drag them away. The appearance of these leech-like critters gives us a clue. They hang around the damp parts of the Maw and will grab and constrict anything they can catch. Suffice it to say, 6 needs to avoid the leech's oily clutches. Not long after her encounter with the greasy grubs, we're introduced to the first real threat the Maw has in store for 6. Meet the janitor. This stubby-legged, lanky-armed catastrophe of a humanoid being is what you get when you throw the phrases "long arm of the law" and "justice is blind" into a blender, let it rot for several days under the sun, and give it a fedora. The janitor is responsible for patrolling this orphanage. He hunts down and captures little would-be runaways and carts them off to be bundled up and shipped off to the kitchens. The children here are the unlucky bunch. They have no way to defend themselves, and even if they somehow manage to escape their captivity, they still have to contend with not only the janitor and the leeches, but also the all-seeing eye, which will instantly incinerate any little bodies its gaze lands upon, leaving only death-posed ashes in its wake, bringing to mind images of what Mount Vesuvius did to Pompeii. And that's just the dangers here. More ghastly horrors await deeper within the Maw, just waiting for a tiny little snack. Speaking of tiny little snacks, 6 looks like she could use one. From time to time, a deep, gnawing hunger will rear its ugly head, causing 6 to hunch over in pain and weakly search for something. Anything to sate the void in her gut. Eat! This time around, she gets lucky when the lone child in the cafeteria takes pity on her and throws her a chunk of bread. It does the job this time, but how long will it be before it hits again? Past the cafeteria, we can see stacks and stacks of child-sized cages, no doubt the tool of preference for trapping gullible children. And further in is the janitor's quarters. All of the furniture in here towers over Six, more so than normal. No doubt built this way to accommodate the janitor's absurdly long torso appendages. She proceeds to trash his room because breaking their things is about the only payback Six can give these mall monstrosities. At least for now. Remember that hunger I mentioned like 4 sentences ago? Well, it's back. And it's back with a vengeance. And this time, it gets her into trouble. Normally, Six would see this meat in a cage for the trap it is, but she's consumed by the hunger. And the hunger doesn't care for logic. Hunger only cares for being fed.
Consume.
She climbs into the cage and begins to gnaw on the flesh inside, only to have that gangly hand reach out and close the door shut, trapping Six within. During the next scene, we find Six amongst the other children within their own cages. Hopelessly, they await their fate to be plucked from perdition and fed to the masses. Six, through sheer will and luck, breaks out of her cage. She's not gonna wait around for the janitor to pay her a visit. As for the other children, Six has no way of helping them. And even if she did, I'm not so sure she would. Six isn't a hero, she's just a kid trying to survive, and sometimes that comes at a cost. From yourself or others. Eventually, Six stumbles upon some kind of preparation room. She spies on the janitor, watching him pluck a child from their cage and wrap them in a bundle. Trying to sneak by seems like it would be a very difficult task. However, while the janitor has reach, he's also blind. If you take a good look at this creature, you can see that he's wearing a mask of some kind that seems to have come apart at the top and has begun to sag down his face, covering his eyes. This boon Six will use to her advantage, but this comes with a caveat. He can hear really well, and anytime Six steps on creaky floorboards, he will be alerted to her presence and pursue her doggedly until he catches her, or loses her trail. This super hearing makes for some pretty close calls, but Six manages to slip away by the skin of her teeth. In the next room she comes to, although filled with mundane things like shoes and suitcases, it feels ominous. Thousands of shoes fill this room, acting like a lake of leather and laces. And within these pedial coverings lurks a monster. Shocking, I know. As Six wades through the only remnants of previous guests aboard the mall, this shoe monster will torpedo towards her. The luggage sitting atop these shoes are like little islands of safety to help Six cross without finding out what happens if this monster catches you. I'm sure it's nothing pleasant. She's not out of danger yet. In fact, it's more of a out of the pan and into the fire sort of situation. She's chased right back into that elevator and is trapped in this small enclosed space with the monster. Lucky for her, there's a hiding space and the janitor isn't as thorough as we feared. Once the elevator has reached its destination, these little creatures that we've seen from time to time will startle and disperse out of their own hiding places, luring the janitor away in the process. These little guys are gnomes, and they are the most piteous creatures of them all. Once they were children, just like Six, until they tried to escape and ended up in the clutches of the mall's overseer, the lady. She transforms them into these mushroom-like creatures and puts them to work fueling the furnace to keep the mall operational. Yet they still retain some of their childlike qualities, as seen by the numerous drawings they've created. Even Six, as cold as she can be, will give them hugs. There's no other purpose to hugging these gnomes, at least not for Six. She can't use them for anything, she just does it because she wants to. Maybe Six isn't completely without sympathy. In any case, Six ends up under the floor of the janitor's toy room. There are dozens of child-sized dolls in this room. I doubt these are for the children themselves, but if not them, then who? Perhaps the janitor uses them for training, or maybe he just likes them. Either possibility is unsettling.
The feeling of rust against my salad fingers is almost orgasmic.
While avoiding the janitor, Six finds herself in a library, quietly sneaking overhead as he patrols below. In the room to the right of this one is an old dusty television that hasn't seen use in quite some time. It still seems to work though and plays some kind of cooking show? It's good enough to distract the janitor for Six's escape, at least until she makes noise just a couple seconds later. Once she shakes her pursuer off her trail, Six will only get a few moments of danger-free peace before she's once again set upon by her current boogeyman. This is the end of the line, for one or the other. Six is trapped in a small room with the janitor's arm snaked under the jammed door, searching the entire room for his prey. Six has to be very careful here. If she touches one of the arms, she will be grabbed. If she hides in one spot, she will be grabbed. And if she's too slow, well, you get the picture. However, with a mix of cunning and guile, Six can grab onto one of the bars of the metal cage, and combined with the stress of the heavy door, her struggles manage to snap one of the bars, making it give way just a little bit more. One more bar and that cage will fully give out. As the door falls, the janitor's arms are severed from his body. While listening to his wails of pain from the other side of the door, Six plays with the severed appendages. With the janitor probably out of a job and no longer a problem, Six moves on to the next section of the mall. The kitchens hold new horrors for Six to discover, as well as a new enemy, which we can spot having a smoke break in the distance while she hitches a ride on one of the many hooks the mall's denizens use to ferry these cutlets and corpses around. Something to note is how big some of these bundles are, much bigger than any of the children. These are, or rather were, guests of the mall, butchered and ready to be prepared for the next arrival. Before we can think any harder on that concept, a deep growl emanates from Six's gut, heralding the ravenous hunger's arrival once again. A rat scurries around, and in the next room, we can hear a snap. That may as well have been a dinner bell to Six's empty gut. The rat is trapped. There is no escape, and is at the mercy of a very hungry child. Devour! This wasn't bread or random slivers of meat. Hell, this wasn't even a carcass. This rat was still alive when Six chomped down. This hunger is growing more and more nefarious. What makes this even more disturbing is the fact that there's a pantry right next to this room. A pantry that has vegetables in it, although Six may not have eaten them anyway. I hear she's not fond of veggies. In the next room is the kitchen where the portly chef prepares meat. Just meat. This kitchen is full of steaks, sausages, hams, and fish heads. Something tells me these vegetables are just for garnish. Who am I kidding? There ain't no garnish on these dishes. As Six creeps along the tiled floor, we can hear the struggling breathing of the chef as he tends to his various pots and preparations. And like the janitor, the chef also wears a mask. It's not quite as obvious as the janitor's was, but you may notice this seam when looking at the back of his neck. Or you may even see the chef reach under his mask to touch his real face. Little Nightmares has more in common with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre than you realize. After maneuvering through the kitchen, Six climbs up a cupboard, and unlike the previous creep, this one can't reach that high, so she's safe to navigate the upper beams. These beams lead to the next floor up where the chef's quarters lie. Twin toilets, twin beds, twin chefs. It looks like Six is dealing with not just one chef, but twins. All of this makes you wonder if perhaps these twins were conjoined at some point. They seem unusually codependent. After unlocking the door back in the kitchen, Six finds the sausage room, where she proceeds to trip over said sausage and run face first into the furniture. After grinding meat to make a long enough sausage rope, Six will be in a freezer full of not beef. When attempting to use the elevator, she's greeted with an unwelcome sight. She's quick to hide and wait for her opportunity to dash away while the chef searches for the perfect piece of cheese. In the kitchen above, Six experiences a glitch. While attempting to distract the chef, he sees her and aggroes. However, in this location, he just can't grab her, no matter how hard or how many times he tries. Unfortunately, he will not stop unless forced to, which led to Six experiencing the crushing strength of those hot dog fingers. The second time around was a much greater success. Did I say second? I meant third. After a little dumpster diving, Six will be in the dishwashing room. Soap suds ooze onto the cracked tile floor while the brother chefs seem to be washing a never-ending mountain of dishes. For there to be this many dishes, there must be a lot of hungry people aboard this monstrosity. Six's goal here is to climb the leaning tower of plates to reach the moving meat hooks above, right where the twin chefs are working. It takes some patience, but eventually the chefs will wander away long enough for Six to make a break for it. She's noticed as she climbs the plate tower, only seconds too late to grab the hook. To her luck, the brothers are too short to reach her, giving her time to grab the next hook. However, even when she's further out of reach, they won't give up the chase, breaking through doors and appearing in doorways, eventually cornering her at yet another dead end. In a moment of panic, Six jumps and latches onto the hook, which carries her away while the chefs scream and throw bottles at her in rage at being outsmarted. This section begins with dread-inducing mechanical clanks as the background music to usher Six into the belly of the beast. On the other side of the portcullis is daylight, bright and bleary. She's found her way to the outer hull. As she climbs the chain upwards, we get a view of vague human blobs crossing a wobbly bridge that extends from a ship they are disembarking to board the maw. From this angle, it looks like they are willingly walking into the maw of a beast, like lambs to a slaughter. Although upon closer look, swine would be a more befitting likeness. All of these guests possess portly frames and drooping faces full of saggy skin. They are hideous, and they are being herded. Do they know what they're in for? Do they willingly walk into the slaughterhouse knowing what fate awaits them? Or are they ignorant of their true purpose? Or perhaps the calling of the feast is alluring enough to make them prefer denial. As Six makes her way further into the feeding den, we spot the lady above. She stands there watching the procession, not like a queen over her subjects, but like a hawk watching its prey. Further in is a grotesque menagerie of gastrolic horror. The guests devour the cornucopia of meat with the sort of desperation and enthusiasm a drowning man gasps for air, while Six sneaks just under their feet. However, not even the buffet can fully distract them from the temptation of a yellow-coated treat. The guests will forget their feast and fling their tables to the side just to chase after Six like she's some kind of ultimate delicacy. Is that what the children are here for? To be the unholy treats that incentivize the guests to arrive? Are they the ortolan bunting of the maw? The gold flakes on their 24-karat sundae? Why else would they chase down Six like mad, slavering dogs, acting like the very definition of consumption? Perhaps, perhaps not. The nature of why there are even children here is ambiguous at best. But we do know for a fact that at least some of them are eaten. The more she explores, the more she learns about the dark secrets this place holds. In a bathroom located in this section of the mall, there's a peculiar mirror. Breaking it reveals a small room with a chair inside. I'm pretty sure this is left over from the wax bellman. He was supposed to be a watchman of sorts, using one-way mirrors through the mall to keep an eye on the guests. You can find a portrait of him in the ladies' quarters, which shows him hanging by a noose. Not sure why there's a roll of toilet paper in here, though. Anyway, as Six navigates the overhead pipes, we see and hear the silhouette of one of the chefs just hacking away at something. Or rather, someone. Considering just a floor above we can find a sleeping guest makes me think it's definitely the latter. It seems that perhaps the meat has been tainted or spiked with some kind of sleeping agent. Or, more than likely, it's something supernatural that makes the guest lethargic, which lends to a much easier and problem-free butchering for the next feast. Speaking of the sleeping guest, we can see his hand in a bucket, and a gnome is trying to tip it over to get some kind of reaction out of him. It's like the gnome's trying to wake the man before he's next on the chopping block. Very generous, considering the guest would have no second thoughts about eating a child. In fact, I have no doubt he would have joined the hordes of guests spewing through doorways as Six runs past, chasing her like the tsunami waves depicted on the walls, crashing about and hot on her heels, looming inches behind her. Grasping hands bent on consumption surround her and close in. She's running out of breath, out of steam, and with one final exertion, she leaps from the lantern and falls to safety while the tidal wave of guests crash against the railing. Denied their meal, the guests reach out hungrily. After dealing with the guest hunger, her own makes an appearance. Each time her hunger surges, it seems to get stronger, practically crippling Six in its gnawing hollowness. A gnome sees her in need and kindly offers her a sausage. Six stumbles forth, pausing a moment before the offering,
Feast!
then leaps onto the gnome and begins to devour it. Why would Six prefer to eat the gnome? These little creatures that she's been so kind to, even going so far as to hug every one of them she comes across. It seems not only heartless, but evil. Maybe knowing what the meat is and where it came from influenced her choice. After all, Six isn't privy to the knowledge that the gnomes were children. Maybe in her mind, the gnome was the least bad choice. But maybe it's something else. If you pay close attention during the scene, you can see a shadow on the counter above when Six chows down. It looks like Six. In fact, this little dark passenger has been here every time Six has proceeded to consume. I think this shadow Six is her supernatural hunger. I believe that it purposefully made Six's hunger escalate along with her cruelty. When Six is hungry, she's not herself. When Six eats, it's the Shadow Six's influence urging her on. I think this Shadow Six is training her in a way, preparing her for what she'll need to do. Moving past that dark deed, now that Six is once again sated, we get a glimpse of the lady boarding an elevator, retiring to her quarters, no doubt. Six makes to follow, after breaking a bunch of stuff. The lady's rooms, while being cleaner and furnished with finer things, still holds an eerie aura. It's dark and depressing, looking as if not one iota of warmth has ever graced the threshold. While observing the broken mirrors and very odd portraits, we can hear the lady humming a tune upstairs. As Six sneaks past the lady while she brushes her hair in front of a broken mirror, the sight and sound conjures memories of tales of sirens sitting upon rocks, luring sailors to a watery grave with their hauntingly beautiful songs. And it just so happens that the lady's song is a slowed down version of the lure of the maw. That isn't the only curious discovery here. We've seen a lot of portraits on her walls, and they aren't just for decoration. They too tell a story. Pictures of swine, of people with malformed faces, of eyes watching you. These are all pieces of the maw. The guests, the inhabitants wearing masks to cover their hideousness, and the eyes always watching out for little escape artists. But the most curious paintings lie in the lady's bedroom. There are 2 portraits of girls with black hair wearing yellow. Only one sits on the wall uncovered and prominent. The other has been taken down, is halfway hidden behind another painting with her eyes scratched out. Why though? There are so many theories surrounding these paintings, and for good reason. There are girls in yellow that kind of resemble Six, and they're in the lady's bedroom, a place of importance. My theory? This is the lady and her sister when they were children. These 2 portraits look so similar they could be twins, and perhaps they were. I believe these 2 sisters were both possible candidates to hold the position of the overseer, the Lady of the Maw. Yes, being the Lady of the Maw is not only a title, but a position to be held, granted by the Maw itself. This particular iteration hasn't been the Maw's sole overseer. She's only the latest, the 5th one to be if this painting is taken into consideration. We can see 5 ladies, 4 in shadow and 1 in the center in light. Curious that Six is named Six. Once Six breaks the vase open to grab the key, we can hear the startled gasp of the lady. She's gone from the mirror now, allowing Six to easily run downstairs to the door. However, as soon as she's inside, the door slams shut, leaving her in darkness. And worse, the lady appears from the shadows to chase Six down. But with Six's ultimate power of sliding, she makes it under the door before she can get got. Mannequins and broken mirrors seem to be the theme here. They line the walls in a cluttered fashion. It's obvious the lady does not like to look at her own reflection. This is why she hides behind a mask. She's obsessed with youth and beauty. However, with her time nearing its end, her face reveals the truth. It isn't merely an aging face, it's becoming hideous and distorted like the other denizens. That knowledge comes in handy because Six can find the lone unbroken mirror inside this room. And once she carts it back out to the main area, the lady is there, waiting for her. It's time for Six and the lady to do battle, 1-on-1. The music thrums and clanks in the background as the lady appears from the surrounding darkness to attack Six. She will perform trickery to trip Six up for an opening, but Six is too quick for her, brandishing the mirror in her direction, damaging her in the process. Six hits with the mirror is what it takes to bring the lady down. Then the scene goes black. But when we can see again, we spot Six on the floor. And as our vision clears further, we can see the shadow, standing where the lady lies. And then her stomach growls.
Do it.
Having killed and feasted on the lady, Six rises to her feet as the dark power of the maw flows into her, granting her the power the lady once wielded. Truly, the lady should consider herself lucky. She got a quick end, unlike her sister whom she betrayed and left to rot down in the bowels of the maw to become the sea hag-like granny, ensuring she would be the one to be granted the power and extended youth the maw provides. Aside from the portraits, don't you think the lady and the granny share similar features? A family likeness, perhaps? I could be wrong, but I could be right. In any case, I think gaining this power was the Shadow's ultimate goal. No amount of food, grain or meat, living or dead, was ever gonna fill the hollowness inside Six. But this power just might. In the final scenes of the game, we watch as Six rides an elevator and arrives in the main hall where the lights flicker and burst just from her presence alone. As she passes, the guests reach out, wanting to make a meal out of her. Instead, they become the meal for her. The dark power sucks and saps the very life out of them, feeding Six as she leaves their corpses in her wake. At the end of her journey, the doors part to reveal sunlight. And as she ascends into that light, the gnomes gather around to watch. And with one final look, she's gone. We can see the mall is an unforgiving place for anyone, much less children. Six's story was a tale of survival at all costs. She's a child thrown into a world of literal nightmares and must do things that are a dark shade of morally gray in order to make it out with her life. Her cold, callous nature served her well in this very unfriendly environment. Could she have made it out with another? Could she still have survived if she had tried to help other children escape? Maybe, but that was never in the cards for Six. Not in this particular slice of hell, anyway. It seems the only way to survive this world is to become part of it. Little Nightmares itself is a child's view of a scary world put through the distorted lens of a nightmare. The adults are big and scary. Unfamiliar places are big and scary. And as a child, you are one of the most vulnerable people in the world. When the adults around you are literal monsters, what's a kid supposed to do? There's also a lot of supplementary material in the form of comics, podcasts, and the prequel Very Little Nightmares mobile game. I did not look into any of that. What I wanted to do was focus on the characters and the worlds presented in the games themselves, rather than building my theories based off of something that may or may not be canon. I've also seen a lot of theories pertaining to metaphors in this game, and I think it's almost impossible not to have some metaphoric ideas presented in a game like this. But that's all up to interpretation. However, there is one that is blatantly obvious. The perpetual cycle of consumption and consumerism through the lens of a never-ending hunger, which is intrinsically tied with the exploitation of the powerless. Not only are the children treated like prisoners at best, but even the inhabitants and the lady herself are being controlled and exploited even while they perpetuate it themselves. And the Maw is the hungry god that eats them all. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you are the GOAT. I want to give a special thanks to all my morning through midnight goats, In Water Ending, Pearl 9907, Isha, Michael Hamilton, and last but not least, Breno. You're all wonderful and I appreciate you. Seriously. Don't forget to like and sub. Comments have become more important recently, so if you'd be so kind to leave one of those, that would be awesome. There's this new thing called hyping. Do that if you want to. I also have a Patreon and YouTube memberships. They range from the typical tip jar $1 up to $5, and there are some perks included. Not limited to getting a shout out at the end of videos. And that's gonna be it for part 1 of this Little Nightmare series. I'll see you again for part 2 on The Midnight Goat.